Hi. My name's Orin. I buried my son 15 years ago, closed the casket, threw the dirt, said goodbye. But last month my phone lit up with his number. My daughter said, "You need to let go, Dad. He's gone." But now I wonder, did she make sure he stayed gone? They took my house. They sold my name. They erased my legacy. And all I ever did was trust them. So when that call came, why did my hands shake like I was holding a ghost? And what I heard next changed everything. A man can get used to silence if it lingers long enough. Every evening, I filled the same chipped coffee mug. 15 years strong, still had the words "One Dad" faded near the handle, even though no one said that to me anymore. I fed Reggie, the mutt my wife rescued years back, now as grey as me. He still wagged his tail, like he didn't notice the house had stopped echoing laughter a decade ago. The floorboards creaked in all the familiar spots as I shuffled through the living room. Dust clung to the sunlight peeking through the blinds. It smelled like time, old, tired, unforgiving. The TV muttered in the background. News anchors. Same stories, different names. Malik used to say, "Pop, one day you gon' turn into one of these chairs." I half smiled at that memory, not from joy, but from the ache it left. My boy. Gone. Not a tear tonight. Just that low thump behind my ribs where grief settled like furniture. Ain't nobody stopped by since Gloria passed. My grandkids? I'm lucky if I see them at Thanksgiving. And the rest? They call when rent's due. Family, huh? Then, the phone rang. Loud. Too loud. It cut through the stillness like a blade. I stared at it for a second too long. That ringtone hadn't gone off in days. Maybe weeks. Could be spam. Or the bank. Then I saw it. Malik's number. The one we disconnected after the funeral. I knew it by heart. My hands shook. Maybe they recycled it. Maybe it was someone else now. That happens, right? I picked it up anyway. Hello? Static. Then, a voice. Dad? Soft. Cracked. But him. I couldn't move. Couldn't breathe. Just held the phone like it burned. Malik? I croaked. Silence. Then, click. Gone. I stared at the screen, the call log, the time. Everything felt frozen. Reggie whined in the distance, but I couldn't hear him clearly. My chest tightened. I buried my boy. I touched the casket. I stood in that church, suit clinging to my back from sweat and sorrow. But that voice, 15 years back, it hit me like a wave. The church had been packed. Folks humming "I'll Fly Away." My knees locked when I saw the closed casket. No last look. No peace. Let him rest, Mr. Deshawn. The living must keep living, the preacher told me. But I didn't listen. I reached for the lid, hands trembling. "Stop," Rena snapped, stepping in front of me. Malik's wife. Her eyes were dry, but her grip was steel. "This ain't right," I muttered. "Let me see my son." "You've seen enough," she whispered. And I listened. Like a damn fool. The memory stung sharper now. Something about the way the casket tilted as they carried it. Too light. Like it was missing something. And the ring on that hand. Malik never wore silver. Always gold. Always that lion headpiece I gave him at graduation. That wasn't his hand. I'd shoved the thought down all these years. Blamed grief. Told myself I was losing it. But that call. That voice. Hours later, long past midnight, I powered on my dusty laptop. Thing word like it hadn't been touched in years. There it was. One unread email. No subject. No sender. I clicked. "He's not dead." 3 words. That's all it said. Beneath it, a grainy photo. A man, tall, lean, with Malik's walk, shoulders slightly uneven, left leg dragging just a hair, walking into some rundown clinic in Atlanta. My breath hitched. That couldn't be him. Couldn't. But, I printed it. The paper came out slow. Every second stretched. The noise of the printer felt like thunder in that quiet room. I stared at the picture. Shook my head. Then stared again. "Is this what grief does to you?" I whispered. But I couldn't look away. I sat there, that photo in hand, hearing his voice on the phone again. My fingers gripped the edge of the desk. I thought about all the strange things over the years. Misdirected mail. Unknown calls that hung up the moment I answered. A package with no return address showing up at Christmas, full of music CDs Malik used to burn. I never told anyone. Figured it was me trying to hold on. But now I wasn't sure what was real. And deep down, I knew, if Malik was alive, someone wanted me to believe he wasn't. Which means someone lied. My voice was low, steady when I finally said it out loud. If my son's alive, somebody's been playing God in my house. That night, sleep didn't come. Just questions, and that picture burned into the back of my mind. The morning air in Atlanta didn't feel like spring, it felt like a dare. Humid, thick, and pressing against your chest as if it was testing how badly you wanted to breathe. I hadn't driven these streets in over a decade. Used to come down here to see my sister before her stroke took her voice. Back then, corner stores smelled like incense and catfish. Now, vegan cafes and yoga studios. New paint, new faces, but pain still knew these streets by name. I pulled up slow to the address from the email. Some clinic tucked between a barber shop and a pawn store. Building was nondescript, brick chipped like an old tooth. My hand gripped the printed photo, edges worn from too much holding. The ink had begun to blur, but the outline of the man was still there. Him or someone made to look like him. I couldn't tell which scared me more. I stepped out of the car, trying to act like I had a reason to be there. Didn't want to draw attention, but I knew I already stood out. Old black man, stiff walk, heart too loud in his chest. I was halfway across the street when I saw him leaning against a lamppost. Hoodie up. Cigarette dangling. The tilt of his head, that slight slouch in the left shoulder, I knew that silhouette. Our eyes met for just a blink. Mine wide, his calm, too calm. Then he turned and walked off, slow at first, like he wanted me to follow but didn't want me to know it. I crossed faster. A delivery truck rolled by, and when it passed, he was gone. Just thin air and the ghost of cigarette smoke. I circled the block, eyes darting, mind racing. Was it Malik? Was it someone he sent? Or was I slipping into some grief-addled fantasy? The clinic door buzzed as I entered. Fluorescent lights, scuffed linoleum, smell of bleach and old coffee. A young woman at the desk barely looked up. "Can I help you?" "Just here to pick up some brochures," I lied, pointing to the health display like I actually cared about cholesterol. She nodded, uninterested. I moved slow, eyes scanning every hallway, every door. A nurse walked by, clipboard in hand. Her eyes met mine, quick, alert. I stepped forward. "Ma'am," I said gently, "I was wondering, do you all have a Marcus or Malik listed as a patient?" Her body paused before her mouth did. Just for a second. "No one by that name," she said too flatly. "Thought I saw someone I knew here," I said, watching her eyes, not her words. People can lie with their lips, but not with their eyelids. Hers blinked too slow, like her brain and her mouth hadn't agreed on the answer. "Thanks," I said, backing away. But inside, something coiled tighter. By afternoon, I was back at the motel. Brick walls, old carpet, vending machine buzzing like a fly trapped in a jar. I'd barely sat down when I noticed it. An envelope slipped under the door. No stamp. No name. Just mine, orange scrawled in a handwriting I hadn't seen since 2010. My fingers trembled as I tore it open. Inside, one sentence. "Stop digging. You buried the truth already." And a torn clipping from a newspaper. Obituary section. Malik's funeral. Date circled in red. I pressed the paper to my face. Why? I don't know. Reflex. But I smelled it. That same cologne he used to wear. Woodsy. A hint of clove. I sank into the bed. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. So someone was watching. Someone knew I was here. And someone was sending me messages in Malik's sentence script. This wasn't some cruel prank. I stayed in that room till dusk fell like a curtain. Sat there in the dark, lights off, just me and a storm of thoughts. Pulled out the old photo album. Pages yellowed, edges curled. Found that picture, Malik on his 18th birthday, flashing that grin, cake all over his chin. I stared at the space behind his right ear. A birthmark, shaped like a crooked comma. If I see him again, I muttered, that mark'll tell me what's real. I opened the voice recorder on my phone. For the record, I said, slow and steady, if anything happens to me this ain't no accident. I walked to the window. Drew the curtain just an inch. There he was again. Same man. Same hoodie. Standing across the street. Not moving. Just watching. I woke up before sunrise, still in yesterday's clothes, sitting crooked in that same motel chair. My neck ached, and my right hand was still resting on the pistol by the nightstand, like my body never really slept. The blinds were shut tight, but I could feel eyes on me from somewhere beyond them. I reached out and pulled one slat down just enough to peek. The street was empty. The man in the hoodie, gone. But something in the air felt wrong, heavy. Old instincts, the kind I thought I left behind overseas, whispered to me, move first, think later. Back then, paranoia kept me breathing. Now, it was the only thing that made sense. I looked at the photo of Malik again, the one from the email. That same tug in my chest came back, the question that never quit, what if I buried a lie? I turned to my old phone on the nightstand. Plugged it in. The screen flickered to life, slow and dim like it was waking from a coma. I opened the voice recorder app. My thumb hesitated. Then I hit play. The message loaded halfway before freezing. Static burst, then, his voice. Dad? If you got this, don't, 4 seconds. Then the screen flashed white. File erased. The whole phone went quiet. I pressed replay. Nothing. I tried again. File not found. I sat there, staring at that screen like it had turned into a grave. Someone didn't want me hearing the rest. Maybe not even him. That wasn't no glitch, I said out loud, my voice flat, certain. Somebody's watching what I touch. I grabbed a notepad from my bag. Started writing everything down, times, names, the call, the man outside, the woman at the clinic. Ink on paper. Couldn't hack that. Couldn't erase it. When my hand cramped, I took my jacket and stepped out. The city felt louder than usual. Sirens in the distance, kids laughing too hard near the corner store, somebody arguing about money 2 blocks away. I walked toward the park. Needed air. Needed space to think. The benches were still wet from last night's rain. I sat near the edge of the duck pond, notebook on my knee. That's when I saw her, an old woman under a half-dead oak tree, tossing crumbs to pigeons. Her profile hit me like déjà vu. She turned, squinting. Orin Deshawn? Lord have mercy, you still walk in this earth? I blinked. Took me a second to place her. Miss Geneva. Used to babysit my sister's kids back in the day. She hadn't aged well, but her eyes still had that spark. We talked for a bit, small talk at first. But then her tone shifted. Heard about your boy, she said softly, not looking at me. Been seeing him round here. My chest tightened. What did you just say? She kept her gaze on the pigeons. Always looking over his shoulder. Like somebody chasing him. I leaned forward. Where? She shook her head. You don't wanna know, baby. You can't bury truth in Georgia clay, it grows back meaner. She reached into her coat and dropped a matchbook beside me. Written inside, a phone number. This'll help you. But be smart. They watchin'. Before I could ask who they were, she stood and shuffled away, leaving a trail of crumbs and mystery behind her. Back at the motel, my nerves buzzed like live wires. I paced, replaying her words. I needed to talk to someone who wasn't lying to me. So I called Drea, my niece. She picked up on the second ring. Uncle Orin? You still in Atlanta? I thought you weren't coming. Her voice trembled. Yeah, I'm here, I said. You seen anything strange? About Malik? Silence. Then she sighed. Uncle, I didn't mean to. Didn't mean to what? Click. Line dead. I stared at the phone for a long minute, then wrote her name under a new heading in my notebook, possible leads. Blood don't guarantee loyalty. I learned that too many times already. As night fell, I turned the lights off and spread my notes across the small desk, photos, scraps, names. Drew arrows between them. There was a rhythm to it all, a pattern of things appearing and then being erased. The voicemail. The clinic record. The envelope. Every clue vanished once I touched it. So I made a decision: no more electronics. No more devices. From now on, everything I found would live on paper. I opened a new page and wrote across the top, "If you're reading this, I didn't make it." Then under it, I started writing my story, not for police, not for family, but for truth. Sometimes justice ain't a courtroom, I whispered. Sometimes it's just a notebook that won't burn easy. I leaned back, exhaled slow, and glanced toward the door. Something slid underneath. An envelope. Inside, a photo, grainy, black and white. My face. Standing right outside this same motel. I pulled into the motel lot just as the sky cracked open. Rain slammed down hard, loud enough to drown out thought. I sat there behind the wheel, hands resting on my thighs, watching the wipers struggle to keep up. My reflection in the rear view looked like a man sitting in judgment of himself. That old woman at the park had said it plain: "They watchin'." Her voice still echoed in my head, soft and sharp at the same time. I didn't know who they was yet, but something told me I'd been under the microscope long before I knew it. Inside the room, I flipped on the lamp. Dim yellow light cast long shadows across the desk. I laid out the letter and that photo of Malik, his smile so wide, full of things I'll never hear again. My eyes drifted to the contract I'd brought along for months, the one tied to the policy after Malik passed. I pressed my palm flat on the paper, tracing the line with my thumb: beneficiary, none specified. That sentence stared back at me like a dare. None. As if my son, my blood, never existed. As if the whole purpose of my life had been filed under forgettable. Then my phone buzzed. A message from the family chat: Ghana Clan Reunion 2024. I hadn't opened that group in a while. Didn't expect much from it. But when I did, there it was. Right next to my name, Old Dog. And a gif, a scruffy dog wobbling around like it had lost its balance. Someone wrote: "Should we put Old Dog at the head table or tuck him in the corner next to the potato salad?" Another one: "Long as he don't fall asleep during grace again." Laughter filled the thread. I stared at it. My thumb hovered over the screen. Everything in me wanted to type out a reminder: I raised every one of y'all. I carried you. I bled for this family. Instead, I took a screenshot. Then another. Evidence. Not just of disrespect, but of erasure. I muttered, "Every empire needs a king's table." But they forgot to ask the king if he was coming. I typed out a reply: "Don't call me Old Dog. I raised you." Then I erased it. No use firing shots when you're aiming to burn the whole thing down later. The rain slapped the glass like it had something to say too. The next morning, after barely sleeping, I pulled on my coat and drove across town to a law office a friend from my counseling days had once mentioned. She worked there now, retirement planning turned legal assistant. The lobby looked like a place where people signed away power without knowing it. Polished floors. Silent elevator. The receptionist smiled like she'd been taught never to show emotion. A young woman came out to greet me, blonde, maybe 30. "Mr. Garner? This way." She led me to a conference room. Chrome legs on the table. Glass walls that made privacy feel like a suggestion. She slid a folder across. "This is the full record from our office." I opened it. Malik's name was nowhere. Not in the original form. Not in the amendments. Next of kin, none. I didn't shout. I didn't curse. Just let the silence sit between us long enough to be uncomfortable. "So, my son didn't qualify?" I said, voice steady. She blinked. "There was no listing of him as a beneficiary, sir. The form was executed as it stands." I picked up the pen she'd placed beside the file. Rolled it between my fingers. Looked at the line she was trying to get me to sign. "You want me to pretend he never lived?" "No, sir. This is simply closure." I leaned back. "Closure ain't yours to give." She paused. Then said, "Without a signature, processing will be delayed. Then let it delay. She watched me walk out with the kind of look folks reserve for a man who still believes in justice. Back at the motel, I shut the door and leaned against it. Just stood there a minute, catching my breath like I'd run miles. I opened my suitcase and pulled out a few old things: Malik's baseball glove, my fire department badge, the wristwatch he broke when he was 10. The words "old dog" danced around my head again, but this time, I smiled. Not kindly. "Old dog learns new tricks," I whispered. I cleared the small table. Took out a whiteboard from the corner of the closet, left over from a workshop I'd once taught. I started writing. Call La Quinton, pull Malik's clinic records, talk to that woman in the park again, open a safe deposit box, make copies, hide the rest. I laid the phone beside the contract folder. Pressed record on a small voice recorder. Day 1. They tried to erase my name, my blood, and my legacy. I'm still here. Then I leaned back in the chair, arms folded. The storm inside wasn't loud anymore. It was quiet. Focused. Somewhere around midnight, I turned off the lamp. The room sank into stillness. Then, 3 soft knocks at the door. No voice. No movement. Just a shadow fading down the hallway. Whoever it was didn't come to talk. They came to remind me they were still watching. The motel room was dark except for the single lamp by the desk casting one lonely circle of light. The rain outside hit hard and steady, like applause at a tragedy nobody wants to talk about. I sat there, surrounded by papers, the contract folder, the matchbook from Geneva, my old fire department badge, the broken wristwatch Malik once knocked over. It looked like clutter. It was clutter. Until I realized it wasn't. It was ammunition. I whispered under my breath, "Service don't pay if your name's buried." I thought about that authorization form I signed years ago, never reading line by line. That line I skipped. Turns out it may have been the fuse. Sitting there, my bones felt heavy but my mind sharpened. No more hiding. Tomorrow I'm going to make them know I'm still standing. Just before midnight, my phone buzzed. I ignored it at first. The storm outside had grown louder, thunder rolling in like a warning. Then I saw the name, Drea. My niece. The only one I half trusted. I opened the message: "Uncle, just check your door before you sleep. They came by today." My pulse went cold and hot at the same time. A visitor. Maybe a threat. Definitely a sign. I remembered how hesitant she'd been when I asked her about Malik in the park. Now she was reaching out. I called her. No answer. Straight to voicemail. I left this, "Don't make this a regret bulletin." Then I flicked off the lamp and sat in darkness. I could have called the police. But too many secrets tied up in what I was doing. I'll fight with paper, proof and precision. My mind shifted faster. The anger turned into readiness. I sat upright in the chair and said aloud, "Tomorrow I pull the lever." I dug into the contract folder again. Found the exact page where all my rights had been signed away. The date. The fine print. 2004. Name transfers. My role erased like chalk off a blackboard. I rang La Quinton, voicemail again. I left a message: "I know what you did. I'm coming home." The old fire instructor in me spoke again: "You don't wait for the fire to burn you, you drive the truck to it." So I did. I pulled up the clinic picture from Atlanta, that email, logs of visitors I found in public records. My notebook filled with arrows and questions. Evidence acquired. Fire contained until I decide to release it. Before bed, I placed Malik's broken wristwatch next to the laptop. Its hands stopped long ago but its meaning hadn't. Time moves whether you like it or not. I stared at Malik's childhood photo, the grin wide, full of hope. I allowed myself a moment of that ache. Then I stood. I packed everything: the badge, the watch, the contract folder, printouts. I sketched a timeline on a napkin: 2008 accident, 2009 funeral, missing heir designation, 2023 email now. I didn't know all the players. Doesn't matter. I know what I have: truth, time, And the fact they underestimated me. I blew out the lamp, plunged the room into darkness by design. Tomorrow I step into their light. I woke with a jolt at 12:15 a.m., heart racing like the alarm I used to hear at the fire station. The room was dark, the only light coming from the laptop screen. The subject line glared back at me, "He's not dead." My finger hovered over the print button, reluctant and certain all at once. Outside the window, sirens wailed, an old sound, one I used to run toward. Now I ran into memories instead. I slammed the laptop shut, the screen flickering and dying like a candle in the wind. I leaned back, breathing heavy, whispering, "They thought I'd fold. They thought I was done." The chair creaked under me as I stood up. This time, I wouldn't sit back down. The words from the family group chat echoed, "We gave him something to do so he'd feel useful." I read it again, letting it settle like poison in my veins. My blood didn't boil, it froze. This wasn't about love. It was about convenience. I remembered the laughs, the celebrations of our boy's memory, while I paid for the punch and stood silent. I grabbed my notebook, wrote, "Smoke and mirrors. Control. Minimize." I dialed Naomi. One ring. Then voicemail, "Hi Dad, we'll talk soon." I know that kind of talk soon. It means not now. I hung up. Quietly whispered into the darkness, "No more not nows. Only what sewed." My fists clenched at my sides, and I felt the tension snap into clarity. I pulled the matchbook Geneva gave me from my jacket pocket. It still had the number inside. I spread it on the desk beside the contract folder and the clinic printouts from Atlanta. 3 objects, 1 truth. I touched the firefighter badge I'd carried through Chicago storms and rescue calls. I served this city. They served me crumbs. I dialed Corville Malik Hughes, the journalist I found months ago. His voice, "Send me what you got. If they want a story, I'll give 'em one." I leaned back in the chair, the room spinning slow. Rage and fear doing their dance. I said aloud, "If I don't do this, family falls. But if I do, they'll have nowhere left to run." The fire inside didn't roar, it burned steady. Controlled. I placed Malik's broken wristwatch next to my laptop. Its hands stopped long ago, but time for me was moving. I stood at the window, watching Chicago's distant lights blinking like they mocked me. I whispered low, "Here's the deal. I'll walk away, just not hidden. You push again, I step through." I gathered the folders, screenshots, notebooks and packed them into an old duffel bag. I repackaged the story in silence. Tomorrow I'd file motions for records access in Georgia and Illinois. Legal. But like a punch in the gut. I remembered James Baldwin's words, "Not everything that is faced can be changed, but nothing can be changed until it is faced." My breath came steady. The FM radio crackled from the window, old gospel hymn drifting. I let it wash into me. I wasn't desperate. I was determined. The storm kind of tense slowed down into readiness. Before dawn, I lay in bed with the duffel by the door. The knocks came. 3 soft taps. No voice. No knock pattern, just warning. I sat up, heart steady. I watched the corner of the ceiling where the shadow moved away. They were here. They wanted me to feel it, knock, step away. Reminder. So I waited. I turned off the light. I didn't hide under sheets. I watched the door. And I waited to decide what happens next. I stepped out of the rental car into the brisk morning air. My tie was slightly off-center, but I didn't fix it. Badge still clipped to my belt like it meant something. It didn't anymore, but I wore it like armor. The courthouse stood tall ahead, no longer just a building but a battleground. Once, I helped folks here after fires. Today, I was the one needing rescue. The folder in my hand felt heavier than truth itself, printouts, footage, paperwork thick with betrayal. I paused on the steps. Took a breath. This was the line between being overlooked and being undeniable. My feet moved steady. I wasn't just walking into court, I was walking into the belly of what they'd built on top of my silence. Inside the law library, the overhead lights buzzed faint. I laid out everything I had on the table: pictures, contracts, clinic reports, notarized affidavits. The librarian, mid-40s, glasses sliding down her nose, gave me a side glance. "You need assistance?" I nodded. "Just need these times stamped, and copies made." She walked off, but I saw the way her eyes lingered on the footage still image. It was grainy, but unmistakable. That walk. That slouch. That was Malik. Or someone who wore his bones. My mind flashed to the funeral slideshow, some man who wasn't my son. They swapped out a ghost for a stranger. I leaned over the table, whispered to myself, they didn't bury my son, they buried their secrets. I signed, stamped, filed motions, subpoenas, requests for clinic logs. Each paper slid into place like a brick in the wall I was building around their lies. Back outside, I needed air. The city's chill bit my face. My phone buzzed, text said meeting moved to 11. That gave me time. I crossed the street to get a coffee but froze halfway. There they were. Naomi and Kentrell. Talking to some man with a camera bag and slick shoes, a private investigator, by the look of him. They saw me. Their conversation stopped like someone yanked the cord. Naomi's eyes widened. She started toward me, her voice low, "Dad, don't. You don't want." I held up my hand. Kentrell stepped forward, jaw tight. "You're out of bounds, old man," I laughed once, short and sharp. "My bounds start where your lies end." He looked down, then away. I kept my eyes on him until he did. Fear had been the currency for years. Not anymore. Later, in the library conference room, Quinton arrived with his too expensive suit and the air of someone used to winning. I handed him the original contract. My signature at the bottom. The beneficiary line blank. His fingers shook just enough to notice. He turned to Kentrell, then back to me. "This doesn't prove," I cut him off. "You rearranged the chairs around a table I built. This was never about inheritance. This was about erasure." The room was silent. The old woman from Atlanta stood in the corner, arms folded. The private eye hovered near the door. The attorney glanced at everyone, pretending not to understand what we all now knew. I stood taller, not because I had power, but because I had proof. That was the difference. I looked each one of them in the eye before walking out. I didn't need to shout. I didn't need a scene. The truth was loud enough. And when I walked down those courthouse steps, I didn't feel tired. I felt ready. Because in that courtroom cage, I knew what was waiting, something they hadn't destroyed. A piece of evidence they overlooked. A recording that belongs to me. I stood in the courthouse lobby, thumb hovering over the play button. My breath came short, not from nerves, but from everything this moment carried. The recorder clicked on, and Malik's voice broke through the hum of silence around me. "Dad, I'm coming home." 4 words. Not distorted. Not buried under static. Clear. Alive. Real. People froze. Heads turned. I didn't move. I couldn't, not yet. I just let it play. The matchbook. The clinic contract. That faint voicemail. All of it lined up now like dominoes, and that voice knocked them flat. I wasn't chasing shadows anymore. I'd caught one. And it spoke. Some folks looked confused. Some just stared. Me? I felt something stretch open inside my chest, a space I'd boarded shut for years. I didn't cry. No tears left to give. Just the steady thump of my heart, louder than the silence that had lived in me too long. By the time I walked into Quinton's office, I wasn't knocking. I just opened the door and let the storm follow me in. He looked up, startled. Naomi sat beside him, eyes wide like a child caught stealing. Kentrell leaned back in his chair, smug turned sour. Renner stood against the wall, arms folded but uncertain. I didn't say a word at first. I played the recording again, softer this time, but loud enough to hear every syllable. "Dad, I'm coming home." Quinton reached for a pen, but it rolled off the desk. I let it stay there. "This silence ends today," I said, folding the contract in half and sliding it across the table. You thought I was finished. Thought age made me slow. But I'm not old, I'm seasoned. I handed the audio device to the court clerk outside, asked it be marked as evidence. Then I pulled out the sealed envelope. Inside, the final page of the contract. Beneficiary line filled in handwriting not mine, Malik Deshawn, alive. Nobody spoke. They didn't have to. The lie had walked into the room before I did. I didn't shout. I didn't break. I stood steady in the ruin of their schemes and let the truth carry its own weight. Later that afternoon, I called for a meeting in the old family boardroom, the place where I once signed checks they now cashed like trophies. The same walls that echoed with laughter when I'd walk out of the room. I came in with nothing but a laptop and my name. The screen lit up with the audio waveform. I played it again. The voice. The truth. Let it ring out over the oak table they once refused me a seat at. Brenna leaned forward, tears in her eyes. Dad, I thought. I cut her off, voice flat. You thought I wouldn't care. I thought you'd remember who taught you not to lie. She dropped her gaze. I laid out the photo from the Atlanta clinic. The timestamp. The footage. The timeline. All of it. Neat. Lethal. You signed away my name. You held a funeral for a body you never confirmed. You played a slideshow of someone else and called it closure. Nobody dared speak after that. I reached into my coat and placed my badge on the table. You see this? It meant something once. Just like this family did. I didn't wait for applause. Didn't need an apology. I packed my laptop and walked out before they could ask for forgiveness. Outside, the Chicago wind slapped me across the face, sharp and honest. I thought of the hymn I'd heard back at the motel, "No weapon formed against me shall prosper." It looped in my mind like armor. I took one last glance at that courthouse. I wouldn't be waiting on justice through someone else's hourglass. I had my truth. I had my proof. That was enough. I called Malik's number again. It rang. This time, I left a message. Son, when you knock, I'll be there. Doors already open. I walked back to my car, placed the badge beside the folder, then turned the key. I wasn't running. I was just done standing still. As I walked away from that boardroom, I heard the elevator ding, and someone took the stairs. The morning felt lighter than I remembered. The sun had climbed just enough to warm the porch rail, and the breeze carried the smell of rain from the night before. I sat with a chipped mug of coffee, both hands wrapped around it like it might hold my peace in place. The street was quiet, the kind of Sunday calm where the world hasn't yet remembered its troubles. For once, I didn't feel the pull of unfinished battles or the sting of what was taken. I just breathed. Deep. Steady. I looked out at the yard, the fence line, the mailbox leaning a little crooked from years of use. Every corner of this place carried a story, some painful, some sweet. I whispered into the air, "You didn't fold, old man. You bent, but you didn't break." And it felt true. The quiet didn't scare me anymore. It wasn't an empty silence, it was earned. Then a car slowed in front of the house, tires crunching over gravel. A courier stepped out, holding a single cream-colored envelope. "Mr. Deshawn?" he asked. His voice was polite, careful. I nodded, took the envelope, and thanked him. My hands knew the handwriting before my eyes did. Malik's. The loops, the slant, same as when he'd sign his name on birthday cards for his mama. I tore it open, slow at first, then faster as if the paper might burn up in my hands. Inside was one folded letter, written in pen, neat but firm, like he pressed each word from his soul. "Dad, I never stopped being your son. I just stopped being safe." The first line alone made my knees weak. He wrote about the people who came after him, how they threatened, cornered, silenced. He said faking his death was the only way to save someone else's life, his daughter's. "My granddaughter. She's got your eyes," he wrote. "And I couldn't let her grow up in the shadow they built around me." He'd been living under protection, watching from afar, keeping his distance so the ones who hurt him couldn't find us. "You fought for me when you didn't have to," he said. "You stayed loud when they wanted you quiet. Because of you, I'm still breathing." By the time I finished reading, my coffee was cold and my vision blurred. I read it again, slower, this time, just to feel his words sink in. On the third read, I cried. Not the sharp, angry tears I'd known all my life, but something different. A quiet kind of release. He ended the letter with a single line that stayed carved in my chest. When it's safe, I'll find my way home. Keep the light on for me. That afternoon, I called Rena. My voice came out steady, almost too calm. Come by, I said. We need to talk. She arrived around sunset, cautious, unsure. We sat by the old fire pit, the one Malik and I built together when he was just a boy, our first real project, back when his hands were small but eager. I didn't say much. Just handed her the letter. She read in silence. By the time she reached the end, she was shaking. Daddy, she said softly. I didn't know. I swear, I didn't. I know, I said, and I meant it. You were scared too. She nodded, tears streaking her face. For the first time in years, I saw the little girl who used to run barefoot through this yard. I didn't say, I forgive you. I just said, we start again, from here. I handed her the lighter I kept since my firefighter days. Let's let the old things go, I told her. She flicked the flame, and we dropped the stack of papers into the pit, the contracts, the lies, the photographs that carried too much pain. The fire caught quick, orange tongues curling the past into smoke. We didn't speak. We didn't need to. When the fire burned low, I went to the shed and pulled out a small wooden box. Inside was Malik's matchbook, a picture of the three of us when life was simple, and the contract, torn through the middle. I took it to the far corner of the yard where the soil was soft and rich. I planted a magnolia tree there, strong, southern, just like my mama used to keep by her porch. I dug a small hole, laid the box beneath it, and covered it carefully. This isn't a burial, I said under my breath. It's grounding. Roots, not graves. The wind stirred, carrying the faint scent of magnolia even though it hadn't yet bloomed. I stood there a long time, just breathing, feeling the earth settle. This is where it ends, I said finally, and where it begins again. When I walked back to the porch, I flipped the switch and left the light glowing. Not because I needed it, but because he might. By the time the sky turned dark, the house was quiet again. Not hollow, just peaceful. I sat back in my chair, hands folded, eyes on that light. And for the first time since everything fell apart, I didn't feel alone. I felt ready. Ready to live again. Ready to wait.